Morning I found out I was supposed to be in Phoenix. That's the part that still gets me. Even now, I had a ticket, a hotel reservation, a rental car waiting at Sky Harbor, my company's regional conference, 2 days of presentations, handshakes, bad hotel coffee. I'd been to 7 of these things in the last decade. I knew exactly how they went. But the night before, my flight got canceled. Weather system moving in from the west, the airline said. I rebooked for the following morning, texted my manager, and figured I'd just work from home. My wife, we'd been married 23 years, was already asleep when I came to bed. I didn't wake her. I just lay there in the dark thinking about quarterly projections, which is probably the saddest sentence I've ever written. Her name is Sylvia. She's 51. She teaches high school English, or she did. She coached the debate team for 14 years. She could argue any side of any question and make you believe she meant it completely. I know that now in a way I didn't then. Her colleague's name is Kevin. He's the vice principal at her school. 47 years old, coached varsity baseball, coached Sylvia's affections for, as far as I can tell, somewhere between 2 and 3 years. I know the exact duration now. At the time, I knew nothing. The next morning, I woke up late. Sylvia had already left for school. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, and thought, this is actually nice. A quiet Tuesday. No airport, no conference, no presentations. Just me, the house, the coffee going cold while I stared at spreadsheets. Around 11, I decided to go out for lunch. Nothing special. There's a place about 4 miles from our house. A steakhouse, old school, dark wood booths. The kind of place that still has cloth napkins. My wife and I used to go there for anniversaries. I hadn't been in probably 2 years. I don't know why I chose it that day. Maybe I was feeling nostalgic. Maybe I was just hungry and tired of the house. I got there early, before the lunch rush. The hostess put me in a corner booth near the back. I asked for it specifically. Habit from years of taking clients to lunch. You always want your back to the wall. You want to see who comes in. I ordered the French onion soup and a club sandwich. I was reading something on my phone, half paying attention to the room, when the door opened and 2 people walked in. I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different. Because she was laughing, full, open, the way she used to laugh at our daughter's birthday parties when the kids were small. I hadn't heard that laugh and I genuinely couldn't remember how long. A year? More? She was with Kevin. I knew him. I'd met him twice. Once at a school fundraiser, once at a faculty Christmas party we'd attended together, maybe 4 years ago. Tall guy, broad shoulders, the kind of man who fills a room by walking into it. They didn't see me. The hostess took them to a table maybe 30 feet away, angled just slightly so I could see their profiles. They sat down and kept talking, leaning toward each other across the table. His hand found hers before their menus even opened. I put my phone face down on the table. I want to tell you that I felt rage, that some part of me stood up, walked over there, said something. But honestly, the first thing I felt was confusion. A weird, floating confusion, like the floor had changed elevation and I hadn't caught up yet. This was my wife. This was Tuesday. I was supposed to be in Phoenix. My soup came. I stared at it. I watched him for 23 minutes. I know because I kept checking my phone, trying to give myself something to do with my hands. They ordered. They talked. She touched his face. Just briefly. 2 fingers on his cheek. The kind of gesture you don't do to a colleague. He covered her hand with his before she pulled it back. I took out my phone and opened the camera. My hands weren't shaking. I don't know how. I waited until they were leaning close again, and I took 3 photos. Clear, close enough, unmistakable. Then I opened our text thread. The last message she'd sent me was from that morning, at school. Have a good day working from home. Love you. I looked at that message for a long time. Then I typed back, hope you're having a productive day, and I attached one of the photos. I put the phone back down. I didn't watch her. I looked at my soup. I picked up the spoon. I ate. About 90 seconds later, I heard her voice, sharp and sudden, from across the room. Not words, just a sound, the kind of sound that turns heads. The hostess looked up. A couple 2 tables over glanced over. I didn't. I asked for the check, left cash, and walked out through the side door. I drove to a park near our house and sat in my car for an hour and a half. I didn't cry. I just sat there, the engine off, the windows fogging slightly. I kept thinking about the laugh. That full, open laugh I hadn't heard in over a year, directed at a man whose last name I'd had to look up in the school district directory to remember. By the time I got home, I wasn't confused anymore. I want to be clear about something. In 23 years, I was never a perfect husband. I worked too much. I missed school plays, recitals, the kind of weeknight things that seem small and aren't. I spent our 12th anniversary at a conference in Denver and sent flowers. I know my deficits, but I also know that none of them, not one, justified what I was about to learn. Because what I saw in that restaurant was only the first thing. I spent that afternoon and evening going through our finances in a way I hadn't done in years. We have a joint checking account, joint savings, and each of us has an individual checking account that carries our personal expenses. That was always our arrangement. What's mine is mine for discretionary spending. What's ours is for the house, vacations, shared life. Except our shared savings had been declining for 18 months. Not catastrophically, not all at once. A transfer here, a withdrawal there. Small enough that I'd seen the statements and filed them away without really reading them. The kind of thing you trust because you trust the person. Over 18 months, $41,000 had moved out of our joint savings into an account I didn't recognize. I'm a financial analyst. I've spent 30 years working with numbers, and for 18 months, I had not noticed $41,000 quietly disappearing from my own household. I found the account by going through bank statements I'd never bothered to open. Individual account in her name. Opened 22 months ago. Regular deposits that corresponded almost exactly to what was leaving our joint account. And a series of payments. Hotels, restaurants, 2 airline tickets booked under her name, and a second passenger, a weekend in Charleston I'd been told was a girls' trip with her friend from college. I called her friend. We'd always gotten along. She picked up on the second ring. "Did you go to Charleston with Sylvia last April?" I asked. There was a pause that told me everything before she spoke. What? She said. "No, I haven't seen Sylvia since." "Gosh, since the holidays? Why?" "No reason," I said. "Wrong dates. I'm sorry to bother you." I hung up. I sat in my home office with the bank statements spread across my desk, and I understood that my wife had been living a parallel life for nearly 2 years. Hotels I'd never heard of. Dinners I hadn't been to. A weekend trip I'd been told was girlfriends and wine and outlet shopping. 23 years. 2 kids. Our son's in graduate school. Our daughter's a junior in college. A house we refinanced together. A dog we rescued together. A life I had believed in completely. I called my brother that night. He's 62, retired. The most practical person I know. He didn't say much while I talked. When I finished, he said, "Don't move any money. Don't confront her yet. Call David." David is his college roommate, now a family law attorney in our state. I called David the next morning. He told me to document everything. Copies of bank statements, records of transfers, screenshots. He told me to do nothing that looked impulsive. He told me that in our state, financial misconduct during a marriage, using joint funds for an extramarital relationship, is taken seriously by courts. He told me to be patient. I am not by nature a patient man, but I have been a strategic one. Sylvia came home that evening as if nothing had happened. I don't know what I'd expected. Some shift in her demeanor, some sign of panic. But she set her bag down, changed clothes, came to the kitchen, and asked what I wanted for dinner. She was cheerful, bright almost. I made myself be normal. We ate grilled chicken. We watched the news. She fell asleep on the couch. I watched her sleeping and felt something I still don't have a word for. Over the next 3 weeks, I gathered everything David asked for. The bank records, correspondence, I had legal access to through our shared devices. We'd always had each other's passwords. An agreement from early in our marriage when we'd both been transparent about everything. I found emails. I found a folder in a cloud account she'd shared with me years ago for family photos that she'd apparently forgotten still gave me access. The emails went back 26 months. 26 months. Kevin was separated from his wife. Had been for 3 years. His wife. I spoke with her eventually, briefly, knew he'd been seeing someone. She didn't know who. She was filing for divorce on different grounds. She was tired, she said. Just tired. I understood. When I finally sat down with Sylvia, I had a manila folder with a copy of everything David had advised me to keep. I'd told her I wanted to talk. I'd said it calmly, on a Sunday afternoon, the dog asleep on the rug between us. I put the folder on the coffee table. I need to ask you something, I said, and I need you to know that I already know the answer. She looked at the folder. The color in her face changed. How long? I asked. She said nothing. How long, Sylvia? I don't know what you. Yes, I said. You do. She cried. She said it started as a friendship. She said Kevin was going through a hard time with his separation and she'd been supporting him. She said she hadn't meant for it to become what it became. She said she had been going to end it. She said she had been going to end it. She said she still loved me. I let her say everything she wanted to say. I didn't interrupt. I didn't raise my voice. I'd had 3 weeks to get the loudest part of my feelings out, and what was left was very quiet. When she finished, I opened the folder. I showed her the bank statements. I showed her the transfer records. I showed her the hotel receipts. $41,000, I said, from our account over 18 months. She went very still. I didn't take. These are our bank records, I said. Our joint savings. The money went into an account in your name. I have 22 months of statements showing it. She didn't answer. There was nothing she could say that would change what was on paper. I told her I'd already spoken with an attorney. I told her that David had advised me on how our state handles the dissipation of marital assets for the purpose of an extramarital relationship. I told her that I was not interested in a dramatic confrontation. I was interested in a fair resolution. I'd like you to find somewhere else to stay for a while, I said. I'm not asking you to leave forever tonight, but I need space. She asked about our daughter, our son. I'm going to tell them what happened, I said, in my own time. You're welcome to tell them first if you'd like, but I'm not going to protect the narrative. She left that night to stay with her sister. I called my daughter the next day. She's 21. Sharp, emotional, the kind of person who feels things at full volume. She cried. She was angry, at first, and I won't lie. Some of that anger came toward me, the way it sometimes does when a child looks for balance in an unbalanced situation. She asked questions I answered honestly, and some I didn't have answers to. My son took longer. He's 25 and very close to his mother. When I called him, he listened without saying much, and then said he needed time. I said that was fair. I meant it. What I did not expect was what happened at the school. I hadn't done anything public. I had not called the school board, had not called the superintendent, had not told anyone in the professional sphere. But Kevin's wife, in the process of her own divorce, apparently shared some details with her attorney that made their way, as these things do in small communities, to people who knew people. Within 6 weeks of my conversation with Sylvia, the school board was aware that the vice principal had been in a relationship with a colleague. Whether that alone would have been sufficient for action, I don't know. What accelerated things was a separate matter. A parent complaint about Kevin's conduct during a prior school year, unrelated to any of this, that had apparently been sitting in a drawer. The two things together were enough. Kevin resigned in December. I didn't arrange that. I didn't make calls. It happened the way some things happen when the truth is already in motion. The divorce was finalized 8 months after that Sunday afternoon on the couch. Our attorneys negotiated the financial settlement. The $41,000 was treated as dissipated marital assets. In the final settlement, I was credited the full amount off the top. We sold the house. We divided what was left evenly. It was transactional and brutal and completely correct. My son came to me about 4 months after the papers were signed. He drove 3 hours from where he's finishing his PhD. showed up at the apartment I was renting, stood in my kitchen, and said, "I'm sorry I wasn't more available. I didn't handle it right." I told him he didn't owe me an apology. I told him losing a version of your parents' marriage is its own kind of grief, and there's no correct way to move through it. He hugged me. We ordered pizza and watched baseball until midnight. My daughter calls me every Sunday. She has strong opinions about everything. What I should eat, whether I'm sleeping enough, which streaming service has the better original content. I find this completely wonderful. I told her that recently, and she said, "Dad, you're getting sentimental in your old age." And I said, "I'm 59, I've earned it." And she laughed. I'm renting an apartment about 2 miles from where I used to live. On the weekends, I fish. I have been fishing my whole adult life, but in the last couple of years, it's become something different. Less about the fish, more about the early morning, the water, the particular silence that comes when you stop waiting for something to go wrong. I'm not going to tell you I've forgiven everything. Forgiveness is a long road, and I'm somewhere in the middle of it. What I can tell you is that I'm not angry in the way I was. The anger has settled into something more like clarity. I see my life more honestly now than I did when I was in it. I see the years I looked at the surface and didn't ask harder questions. I see the years my wife was unhappy and told me in ways I didn't hear. None of that excuses the choices she made. But it's part of the picture, and I'd rather have the whole picture than a comfortable piece of it. Kevin is working in private education now, I'm told. I don't know the details and I don't look for them. Sylvia and I are civil. We have children together. That doesn't end. At our son's graduation this past spring, we sat in the same row, 2 seats apart, our daughter between us, and we watched him walk across that stage. Sylvia cried. I did too, a little. 25 years ago, I'd held this person as an infant in the maternity ward of a hospital that's since been torn down, and here he was, Dr. Everything. A whole life ahead of him. Some things hold even when others break. That's the truest thing I can tell you. I didn't know, when I chose that restaurant on a random Tuesday in November, that I was choosing the day that would divide my life into before and after. I thought I was just hungry. I thought the quiet morning had been a gift. Maybe it was, just not the kind I was expecting. I sat in that booth. I ate my soup. I took 3 photographs. And I drove home a different man than the one who'd left. People ask me sometimes, not often, but sometimes, whether I regret how I handled it. Whether I should have confronted her that day in the restaurant. Whether I should have made the scene she was probably bracing for when her phone buzzed and she looked down and saw that photo. I don't regret it. Not the quiet, not the patience, not the 3 weeks of careful, methodical documentation before I ever sat down across from her on that Sunday afternoon. Here's what I've come to understand about choices, and I don't mean this in any grand philosophical way. I mean it practically, the way a 59-year-old man who's lived enough life to have made his own mistakes understands it. Every choice has a weight to it. Not punishment, not cosmic payback, just weight. You spend 2 years building a second life inside your first one. You don't get to walk away from that without carrying something. Sylvia didn't lose her marriage because the universe decided to balance its books. She lost it because 26 months of decisions, stacked one on top of another, created a structure that couldn't hold. And I lost something too. That's the part I didn't expect to sit with as long as I have. I lost the version of my life I thought I was living. That version, the one where 23 years meant what I believed it meant, that's gone. And grief doesn't care whether you're the wronged party. It just shows up anyway. What I kept, though, is the clearer version. The one that doesn't have soft edges I chose not to look at. I know now that I was a man who worked too much and assumed too little. I know that presence, real presence, not just physical proximity, is something you have to choose, actively, again and again. I wasn't choosing it. Not toward the end. Maybe not for a long time before that. None of that is a justification for what she did. I want to be precise about that. Understanding your own failures doesn't mean absorbing someone else's, but it means you stop asking, how could this happen, and start asking, What do I do with the life I actually have? The $41,000 I recovered in the settlement. What I can't recover is the April weekend I thought she spent with her college friend. Those 48 hours exist somewhere and I wasn't in them. That's the real loss, not the money. The ordinary time that turned out to be something else entirely. My son drove 3 hours to stand in my kitchen and say he was sorry he hadn't handled it better. That mattered more to me than anything the attorneys negotiated. My daughter calls every Sunday and argues with me about things that don't matter, and that is, genuinely, one of the best parts of my week. What this whole thing taught me is that integrity isn't what you do when people are watching. It's what you do when you're sitting alone in a car in a park with a fogged windshield and every reason to do something reckless. I didn't. I went home. I made a plan. I stayed honest with my kids even when it was hard. I let the truth do its work without me forcing it. That's not heroism. That's just the minimum. But sometimes the minimum, done consistently, is enough to build something back from. I'm still building.